Hello, my name is Brad Imsdahl. I'm from Becker, Minnesota, and I'm here with my friend Lothar.
Hello, my name is Lothar Propson. I'm from Koblenz, Germany. And we both are together on our D-Day memorial tour. We want to honor all the soldiers that lost their lives here to give Europe freedom. But also we want to honor the German soldier. They just do their job.
Lothar, did you know my father was in the war?
Yes, you told me.
And here is his picture.
Okay, Brett, you also know that my father was a soldier.
Yes.
Here is his picture. What do you know about your father in the World War II?
Well, my father did not fight here at the D-Day invasion. He came a little bit later during another famous battle called the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, my father also was a soldier in the Battle of Bulge. He was 17 years old when he started with his education to be a soldier. In November he became 18 and then he go to the front and was wounded in December. And after that the war was over for him and he became to be a prisoner.
Well, my father did not make it to the Battle of the Bulge. He was 19 years old at the time, but their troop ship was sunk out in the middle of the channel by a German U-boat, by a torpedo. But my father survived and came, and because his division was depleted, they sent him about 100 miles south of here to fight out the rest of the war.
But your father is still alive, isn't it?
My father is still alive. Would you like to hear his story?
Yes, I want.
Well, here it is.
You grew up in Bruton, Minnesota, but you went to high school in Michigan. So why did your family move to Michigan?
That was employment for... There was no employment in those days. Everybody was without work, but they went there for jobs. Mm-hmm. Factory job. I think they made cartons for gun turrets, and the gun turrets were for airplanes, I think. So I entered the service in October of '43. I volunteered.
Were you allowed to enlist before turning 18?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was a common thing in those days. Kids thought they'd get a better job in the service if they volunteered before they were 18 instead of being drafted, say.
And then it says that you were assigned to the 66th Infantry Division at Camp Rucker, Alabama?
That was after basic training. Basic training was in Camp Landing, Florida. I don't remember how many weeks or months. Then you got a furlough back to Michigan for 30 days to get up there, have a couple of weeks up there, and then another 3, 4, 5 days to get back to Camp Rucker, Alabama. And then you're assigned to your division and your company and everything. And because I had driven a truck in civilian life in the summertime, that was on my records, and because of that I became a Jeep driver, but I was number 3 in line in our company because there were 2 each company had 2 Jeeps, and those 2 Jeeps, they were already assigned, but I was number 3 in line, so I was assistant Jeep driver. It was a good deal. I got out of a lot of walking when I could ride in a Jeep.
D-Day was June of 1944. You sailed for England from New York on November 15th, 1944. That's when you left New York.
Sounds about right.
Do you remember anything about life in England before you went over to France?
Well, we were at Weymouth, England. That was the town we were in. And whatever everybody was doing in the company, whatever their jobs were, I was getting vehicles. I was going to wherever to pick up a 3/4 ton truck or something, and then maybe a larger truck here, and through that month or so that we were there, we were outfitting the company, and I did driving every day then
Okay.
to different parts of England. And then Christmas Eve of 44, that was the day that I came back from whatever town was north, like 100 miles or so, because it was a big drive up there and back. And I came back with our Jeep, and my goodness, our whole company was packed up and ready to go. And I didn't even know about it until I pulled into camp at about 6:30 at night, and they had my stuff all packed. And so we loaded up the Jeep, whoever went with me, and then from there we went to Southampton to get on the ship. I didn't ever tell you, but I was a bugler also at one time for about 2 or 3 days in Linz, Austria, after the war.
After the war?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got a little bit of your band record on it too.
Yeah, big deal.
Okay, then on December 24th, so that was Christmas Eve,
Yep.
the entire 66th Infantry Division left the Southampton port and crossed the English Channel heading for France. And most of the troops were on the SS Leopoldville, which was a Belgian passenger ship converted into a troop transport. It said there were 2,500 troops on board that ship. That ship was torpedoed by a German U-boat around 6 p.m., but you were on a different ship because you were with your Jeep. Now, do you remember, did you know, or did you see the ship get torpedoed, or did you know about it when you were
I
crossing?
didn't know anything about it until we got off the ship the next morning, or whatever time, I don't remember. But all I remember is driving to the airport in Rennes, France, because that was where the remnants of our regiment, I suppose. There were our company commander and a few of the lieutenants and half a dozen people from our company were sitting here in a snowdrift. In the middle of the night, it was dark, and they had a bonfire going. And I came driving up, and I was told that's where I'd find the rest of our unit, and that's what I found was 8 or 10 or 12 guys from our company. And of course, then they told us that the rest of the troops were sunk. So that's the first I knew about it.
Okay, so you were just doing your job as a Jeep driver, and you drive up and you find out everyone's
Just
gone.
by luck, I was on the different ship.
What did you think when you found out that most of the men were
Well, you
gone?
didn't realize it, you know. You heard it, but you didn't know. You didn't know who was gone, and of course you found out. But well, that's about all.
So there was a bunch of people that you went through training with
Oh,
that
yeah,
lost
yeah.
their lives.
Yeah.
You knew a lot of the people that died.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody from our company would be, it'd be 4 platoons, and each platoon had 48 men. And then headquarters platoon was a 5th platoon, but the 4 platoons, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I was in the 2nd platoon. And of course, all of the guys in the 2nd platoon went down in the ship. And some of the 4th platoon also went down in the ship.
Okay.
But then the other guys from the 1st and the 3rd, they weren't on that same ship, they were on a different ship. So nothing happened to them. But we were so completely under strength, you know, we only had part of our division, and
Yeah.
so instead of going up to Germany, and that was at the Battle of the Bulge, see, that's why we went across so fast. But instead of going to the Battle of the Bulge, we ended up relieving the 94th Division, which was full strength, and they went up to the Battle of the Bulge, and we took their place because we were under strength.
Okay.
Because all we had down there was pockets of German soldiers.
But then you were sent down to Saint Nazaire in Lorient, France.
Yeah.
That pocket of German
Yeah,
resistance.
there were 2 pockets there, and then Bordeaux had another one, and
What do you remember about during those 5 months?
well, I was only actually a rifleman for, I think, probably under 3 weeks. It would be an outposts. You'd be out, you'd have, the army would have your whatever lines you might have that you were protecting or whatever, but then you'd have outposts. Quarter of a mile, half a mile, I don't remember how far. But then you'd be right out, you know, in front of everything. And the first place that I was in was probably only for a day or 2, but I think the second place was probably more like 4 or 5 days or a week. And then the main thing that happened there was that we would be directing artillery, because the artillery would be quite a ways behind us, and we would call in and tell them that there'd be that particular area, there'd be markings on a map or something that we would go by, and then we would tell them that that particular area, there's activity or whatever is down there, and then the artillery would shoot right over your head, you know, and scare the heck out of you the first few weeks. And then the third place that I went to, then I was in a bunker, an air raid shelter, and there was 12 of us in there, and we had one big door, sandbags, and we had a swimming pool behind us. It was frozen, it was winter time. We'd get our water out of there, and the fellow that I would stand guard with, his name was Burwell, and he was shaky. He was always shaking. I don't know what was the matter with him, but you'd get these chocolate candy bars in your key rations, and here we are in the middle of the night, you know, everything dark, and you're watching out there in the dark, and here's Burwell standing on this side of the door and me on this side of it, and he's taking a bite of this chocolate candy bar, and it would echo through the whole place, you know, well, not loud, but it's enough so that you didn't want to be making noise. And that was about the first place that we actually got shot at with machine gun fire, because our place was just peppered with machine gun fire that night, you know.
Because he was eating candy bars, or
I don't, maybe so, maybe not, I don't know. Maybe that caused it, I don't know.
but you were under heavy attack.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I remember the next morning there was still a rooster out there in the yard, out in front of that thing. And we never got any eggs. But then after that is about the time that the regular #1 Jeep driver got hit, and he went sent back to the States. As far as I know, I don't know any more about him, whether he lived or not. So then I got the #2 Jeep driver's job, permanent.
And that took you off the front lines.
Well, every day you were back and forth a dozen times, you know.
So what was your job as Jeep driver? What were you driving back and forth? What were you doing?
Well, the big thing every day was food and ammunition and stuff.
So
And then-
you'd go back to the base camp,
Yeah.
pick up supplies.
I'd go back, we'd have a kitchen in a tent. And they'd be cooking the meals, and you'd put them in big containers, and I had a trailer, and we'd load that thing up, and I'd drive up there. I wouldn't drive up to the front lines, I'd drive up so far, and then these fellows would walk back to get some hot food or something, see. It was twice a day that they got fed.
And then resupply the ammunition and things like that.
Mostly mortar fire and stuff like mortar shells.
You said that you had good eyesight so you could drive your Jeep at night
Pretty good, yeah.
without lights.
Yeah.
So when you were driving your Jeep, you were under fire too.
Under what?
You could have been under fire when you were trying to drive your Jeep back and forth.
Oh yeah, that happened. Well, I guess probably the one big time is when I was probably going too fast because I was raising dust, you know, and then I drew an awful lot of artillery fire because of that, and I ended up at the kitchen that time, and the tent, the kitchen tent, and all this stuff got hit pretty good. So,
So
but
you,
that's that was the same thing.
so you learned not to pick up. You learned not to pick up dust after that.
I didn't. You're a kid, you know. You kids do funny things, and you would be driving officers that would probably going here or there, wherever they were going. You were always busy.
Now that part of France, the Germans surrendered on May 8th, 1945. And you told me that shortly after they surrendered, you drove your Jeep with some officers across the German lines to their camp to get some war souvenirs.
Oh yeah, that was the same
Can you tell
day.
us about that day?
That was the same day. Nothing special. It was no different than any other day, except you were a little nervous driving right out of across your front lines and right up to their lines without knowing what they were going to do. But one of their outposts, several of the German soldiers were there, and one in particular came right out to the road and hi, or talked to us, and we told him where we were going, and he said he'll ride with us because he'd point out where the mines were in the road, so we wouldn't hit one of them.
So this is like one day after they surrendered.
Yeah,
Now all of a sudden they're your best buddies.
And
Tell
here
me.
we get up to their company CP. Instead of being at my company CP, here I was at their company CP. And there was 100 or 200 of them, those soldiers all loitering around, not doing anything. And they had all their rifles stacked up, and they had all kinds of typewriters and binoculars and all kinds of stuff in piles. We got in there and helped ourselves to whatever we wanted. I got binoculars. I got several pistols, but I can't remember. One was I wanted a Luger, and I didn't get one. And I wonder if it wasn't a Walther, because I had a Walther. I think that was the one I took back with me. And then I took 2 or 3 other pistols for some of the other guys were back at camp. And
So this was a different day that you got the rifle,
yeah,
but you did the same thing. You drove across the German lines.
well then that was when we went right into St. Nazaire, a whole convoy. You know.
Oh, okay. So you were with a whole bunch of Americans.
Oh, yeah,
then.
yeah.
But the first day that you went in, it was just you and you said the company commander and maybe a lieutenant.
There was a lieutenant, company commander, because he was the big boy in our company.
So they wanted war souvenirs and
Oh,
they
yeah.
ordered you to drive them
Oh, yes. Yeah.
by
Yeah,
yourself.
I had no idea what we were going to do until he said that's where we're going. So
all by yourself. There were no other Americans there. It was just you
just
and
the four of us.
you and the entire German army.
Well, the company, a couple hundred guys, yeah.
And you just go driving one day
Driving
after
right
they
in,
surrender,
yeah.
right in and
And here they got out and they start pillaging around, you know, and they were probably talking with German officers, I suppose. And I stood there by my Jeep, and I didn't want to leave that. I had a 50 caliber machine gun sitting right over my head on my Jeep, you know. And I didn't want those guys in my Jeep. What could I do? You know, a couple hundred guys there, so.
when the Americans were driving into the places that were occupied by the Germans, do you remember any of the French civilians in that part of France and how they reacted when the Americans went driving in? Do you remember that?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, they just loved you. Yeah. And we weren't supposed to fraternize. We weren't supposed to do anything, and they were, well, they were happy to see you.
About a week after the Germans surrendered, it said the 66th Infantry Division made a 700-mile trip into Germany to occupy 2,400 square miles of the Reich territory, including the city of Koblenz. So do you remember anything about Koblenz?
All I remember is getting a barracks or a room in one of the buildings, but I don't remember anything there. Wasn't very long. 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, I don't remember.
Okay, so you don't remember Koblenz at all?
They were all the same.
Okay. Did you remember it being damaged, bombed?
Oh yeah, that was common. That was every town.
Every town was destroyed, pretty much.
Well, quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah. And then you got transferred to a different unit and
The
you went
42nd.
You went to Salzburg, Austria, and you drove a truck to help feed German prisoners of war
Yeah.
in a camp outside of Salzburg.
Yeah.
So what stories do you remember about Salzburg?
Well, Salzburg itself, there's just a big city where I picked up groceries and a bakery. I picked up bread at a bakery and I picked up meat, fresh meat, at a butcher shop. And then I'd drive back to the first camp was at Hellein, Austria, and it was a big German prisoner of war camp. And then they'd get so much of the groceries and stuff, and then I'd go further up where I'd get into the mountain area, and then I would deliver to several different small groups up in the mountain area. And I was stationed, I think, the town was Abtenau, Austria. And I suppose that's where I started out from when I'd go driving the next day. I was stationed at Goling, Austria too for a while, but I can't remember. I had to be driving truck there because that's all I ever did there.
Now you told the story once about it raining.
About what?
About it raining outside, and you didn't have a tarp for your truck, so you stole a tarp from a French
It was a
truck
German truck
or a French truck.
loading up French truck, loading up stuff, and he had a tarp over his stuff, so it started raining and he didn't have a tarp anymore. I took the tarp. And that's when I got to that first big prisoner of war camp, and the fellow that would get up in a truck with me and he would count every loaf of bread that he'd take. Zwei, drei, you know, and 21 and 22 and you know, and he go, and I got to be listening to him every other day about, and then he'd count out all the stuff he'd need, but he thanked me. He was real grateful that I had covered the stuff with a tarp so that the rain or the hot sun wouldn't get on it, you know. And
So what made you think that you could steal a tarp off a French truck?
that they didn't. We'd take whatever we wanted. We didn't have to ask. We just took it. Whether it was German civilians or of that order. See, that would have been in Austria. That was German. So it wasn't that you were being mean. It was just that you were the boss and they were the underdogs, I suppose you'd call them. But I liked the guys. They were prisoners of war, and I don't mean that I liked everyone, but you got to be friendly with some of them too. So.
Now, you had a canteen. This was your canteen.
No, that's a German canteen.
Okay. So do you want to hold that up and who did that for you? What did they do? Why did you get that?
There it says, Going, Austria. See, that was a German prisoner of war camp there. Mm-hmm. And I gave a German prisoner a package of cigarettes to paint this and everything. This was our 66th insignia. That was 42nd. Half of it was 42nd insignia. And this says on here, December 1945. Yeah, it says 66th Division on there. But this is a German canteen, see.
So did you get to know any of the German prisoners, or?
Just when you see them, you'd, hey, you know.
They were nice to you, and.
Oh yeah, this was after the war. They were waiting to go home too, you know. So.
Yeah. Now, so your son, me, married Susan.
Yeah.
Your daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
She is a descendant of a German immigrant.
Yeah.
And her distant cousin, Lothar, lives in Koblenz, Germany. Lothar is the son of a German soldier, and he would have fought in the war about the same time that you fought.
Yeah.
So Lothar's father and you were enemies during the war.
Yeah.
But today, his son and your son are very close friends.
Yeah.
So in a few weeks, you know that Sue and I are going to go to France. We're going to go to Normandy and see where the D-Day invasion was. And we're going to visit Lothar and Monica when we get there. So what do you think about that? And do you have anything that you'd like to say to Lothar?
Well, it would be interesting meeting him sometime. I don't think that'll ever happen, though. I don't think I'll ever go over there, and it would be interesting to have known where his dad was in the war in those days.
He was in the Battle of the Bulge.
He was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was wounded there.
Yeah. Yeah, would have been the same time as me then, except instead of going to the Battle of the Bulge, because our ship was sunk,
Mm-hmm.
we went to the pockets and did that.
So what do you think of the son of his enemy, or I mean, your enemy's son and your son being friends? What do you think of that?
I think it's good. Another thing, though, is I even hauled German prisoners of war, German soldiers. During the war, I'd haul them back to the prisoner of war camps in the Jeep, just one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Because a Jeep would only hold, I was a driver, and there'd be one prisoner, then 2 guards. But they were just like you or me. They were just ordinary people. And I guess it's the rulers of the countries, like Hitler, and
They're the ones that caused the trouble.
yeah.
Did the German prisoners seem happy that the war was over for them?
Oh yeah, yeah. We never had any problems with. They were happy. They were happy to get home. They wanted to get home. That's what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
They were probably thankful that we were feeding them and housing them, but that never entered into the picture, you know, because they had nothing to say about it. We were the ones taking care of them.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your story, for your sharing your story.
Okay.
Okay, Brett. I know that I will meet you here, so I have written a letter to your father. Do you want to hear what I've written to your father?
Yes, I would.
Dear Mr. Imsdahl, may I introduce myself. My name is Lothar Propson, and I live in Koblenz in Germany. I'm very glad to call your son Bradley as my friend. Your daughter-in-law, Susan, and me, we have the same historic family ties 200 years ago. In the last year, we spent together a beautiful vacation by exploring 5 European countries in 14 days. On our tour, we have had interesting discussions about to live in Europe and also about the dark times in the years of the World War II. Bradley told me that you served in this time as a US soldier and that you also know my hometown, Koblenz, and a little village nearby named Remagen. I showed Bradley and Susan and her parents the 2 towers of the former bridge across the Rhine, which today is a memorial. Visitors can visit the spans of the bridge as a warning against the war. In this year we spent our vacation on a very historic soil, so we called our tour the D-Day Memorial Tour 2015. In my mind I have the worst fears, so I thought about what will happen if you met my father, because he was a soldier, but on the German side. You and my father perhaps must be enemies, because the German government has ordered that you both had to be enemies. This is a very sad chapter in the German history. The sons are now best friends, and we visit together the Normandy to honor all the soldiers which give here their lives for their countries. The war which the Germans brought about Europe is not to apologize with nothing. And it fills me with a great sadness when I see all the graves and the young fallen soldiers. But I'm happy that I can write you today. Dear Mr. Imsdahl, thank you with all of my heart for your courage and your commitment to liberate Europe and Germany of the reign of terror. I was born in 1960 and I grew up in freedom and peace. My father told me so much about the war, and sometimes he wept. and his voice failed when he spoke about agony, hunger, and imprisonment. My father was 17 years old when he was sent to the front at the Battle of Bulge in the winter of 1944. Just a month later he was wounded, and for him the war was over. He had learned his lesson, and I had learned by my father. I think you and my father had also can be good friends, but unfortunately the time was against it. It did not miss much at Bradley, and I would not live because the fathers have lost their life in this terrible war. I still remember the rest of the destroyed cities when I was 5 years or 6 years old, and the fear of the people during the Cold War up to 1989. The inhuman and crazy wall in Berlin and through Germany fell down, and finally all people in Germany could live in freedom. All people in the world need to preserve peace and talk to each other. So Bradley and I, we do what we can do for this target. I thank you that I got to know your son Bradley and your daughter-in-law Susan, and I would like to present you like a symbol of freedom, a piece of the Berlin Wall. This is an original piece of the Berlin Wall. After that we have freedom in Europe and Germany. Perhaps, Mr. Imsdahl, you know the actor Leonard Nimoy alias Mr. Spock. Therefore, I close my letter with his famous motto, live long and prosper. Yours sincerely, Lothar Propson from Koblenz, Germany. Thank you.
Das ist gut. Very good.
Yes. And now we have to do what we have to do. We must live in peace and told this message to anyone on the earth. My dear friend.
My friend Lothar.
So, do you want to follow me?
Yes.